And a very good morning to you. We're live in London and you're with Monocle on Sunday. I'm Emma Nelson, and joining me in the studio, Alex von Tunzelmann and Vincent McAviney, to tell us what they've found in the papers this weekend. Good morning. Alex, what have you spotted?
Well, all sorts of stories. I think possibly my favourite one is about the great cheese heists and what's happening to luxury goods, how they're getting stolen.
And how about you, Vinny?
Well, there's a fascinating story about how influencers in France are teaching people in younger generations who aren't enjoying work to play the system and get themselves fired in a lucrative way.
Brilliant. And we'll be checking in with our Balkans correspondent.
I'm Monocle's man in the Balkans, Guy Launey, and I'll have a roundup of all the latest from the region, including Serbia's presidential rally letdown and a controversially quiet place in Croatia.
Plus, we'll be hearing from our editorial director, Tyler Brûlé, who joins us from a balcony in Lisbon. It's the 13th of April, 2025. Live from London, this is Monocle on Sunday.
Live from London, this is Monocle on Sunday with Emma Nelson.
And a very good morning to Alex von Tunzelmann, Vincent McAviney. How are we this morning?
I'm very well, thank you.
Glad to hear
Good,
it.
thank you.
And you're just about to embark upon a long run. So we're going to be talking a little bit about running later, because Vinny's you're doing the London Marathon.
Doing the London Marathon 2 weeks from now. I'll
Okay.
be on the starting line. Yep.
Why are you doing that then?
Well, I was lucky enough to be given a media place. I wanted a new challenge, and I'd done half marathons before, but I never quite got to the full one. And I'm running for two organisations. One is a charity that supports people from non-traditional backgrounds to get into journalism, which I think is really important. And the other is a charity that helps try to prevent suicide, which is something I have and many other people have been affected by, having someone take their own life. So I just thought it was a good way of sort of challenging myself, getting more focus and raising a bit of funds as well.
And very admirable it is too. You said that you've done lots of half marathons. How is it? How's the jump? I think I know what the answer is.
It's significant. Yeah. I mean, yeah, it feels like a half marathon feels like the sort of first 3 days of the Titanic. It's nice, you feel good, you're loving the music playlist, and then once that sort of halfway iceberg hits, it gets rocky, it gets really rocky,
Okay,
and you're just clinging on at the end.
You're plunging into cold water. Alex von Tunzelmann, the marathon runner in you, has it ever emerged?
No. I mean, unless I was being chased by something bigger than me with teeth, I think the idea of me running at all is very unlikely.
Okay, well, we'll let Vinny do it for you then. Vinny, the best of luck with your run this afternoon. Let us head to Lisbon now. The time here is 3 minutes past 9. And our editorial director, Tyler Brûlé, resplendent on his balcony with parrots. Is that correct? Good morning, Tyler.
Good morning, Emma. Good morning, Studio One guests. Bom dia from Lisbon, where actually the parrots have departed. We were doing a sound check just before we went on air, and there were about 5 parrots. There is some type of cable which runs across to the other side of the street at a sort of a high level at about the seventh floor, and a set of very fine-looking parrots were there only minutes ago. But anyway, they've dispersed now.
That's a shame.
I was hoping we'd have a backing track. Oh wait, they're here. Actually, can you hear them?
You might have to go and put
just faintly.
If they start,
they are back actually on cue.
If the volume increases, then we'd be grateful if you could actually share it with us. It's like having it's lovely in Zurich. You have your audience in the in Dufourstrasse 90, and in Lisbon, the parrots have turned up to sort of offer to be your cheerleaders. It's great. What takes you to Lisbon? Because this is now your own balcony, isn't it?
It is, yes. Well, shared with my mom, but yes, these things sort of happen where one looks for, a sunny spot, and this was probably, I don't know, it was probably a 3-year project. I think where would be a good place for, sunnier life, and maybe a little bit of an escape from Toronto in the wintertime for my mom, and so there was Malaga, there was other stretches of Spain, there was south of France. And then there were multiple trips here. And in the end, Lisbon won out about probably 18 months ago or so when we purchased the place. Then we've been going through about sort of 9 months of renovation, and it is all finished. And it's sort of moving in weekends. So work is complete. Of course, you always find a few small snags along the way, like the washing machine not being sort of actually connected to the plumbing system. Never mind. we will figure that out tomorrow. But generally, everything in a fine state. And now it's the fun bit. We were just out at fantastic vintage shops yesterday, trying to find a bit of Brazilian and Portuguese modernism to fill the corners, etc. So that's been part of what we've been up to.
And what have you found?
Oh, bedside tables. Listen, if you bought I don't know how many bedroom. I think probably if you bought a 36 bedroom house, or maybe you just wanted to move into the hotel business. We were at this fantastic warehouse yesterday, and they deal in clearing out hotels and hospitality facilities. They have this one floor, which it must have been probably from the late 1970s, could have been very early 80s, and it was just very fine Brazilian wood with inlay, probably a bit on the traditional side for me, but there was 36 of everything, 36 pairs of bedside tables. There were sideboards, but just in sort of various states of I wouldn't say heavy use. I mean, if you would have looked hard, I think you could have had a rather pristine set. So anyway, we didn't go for the 36 sets. But there were some bedside tables found. There was a nice sort of, it certainly wasn't Florence Knoll, but there was, we found a very nice modernist little side table. And today's garden day. So today is actually venturing out to Oeiras, and we're meeting. We're meeting José, because of course, who else do you meet in Portugal but a José? José is we're going to be looking at palm trees and tropical plants, because this balcony needs filling.
Exactly, and this is and your mum is a very, very keen gardener, isn't she? I mean, it must be incredibly exciting to go from Canada and indeed from Zurich, where the climates are slightly different, from let's ring up José for our palm trees.
Yeah, well, absolutely. First we have to make sure that Mom and Jose get on first, because they've not met yet. So that's round one. I'm sure there'll be sort of differing opinions as to what will work on the balcony and what may not. But anyway, there's been a preliminary selection, I should say. We've already been out a couple of weeks ago, so we were sort of the advanced scouting party in advance of Mom's arrival. So that will also that will be happening today. And then just kind of just getting into sort of the rhythm of life here. And it's a fascinating city, actually, having been in Athens earlier in the week. And you look at the boom that is happening at that end of the Mediterranean. Then you're out over on the Atlantic here, and I would say that it's just, one can't help compare these things, but if you look sort of economically in terms of course, the real estate boom, the development boom, Athens is probably 3-4 years behind, but you can definitely sort of feel the forces that Athens is about to go through a Lisbon moment, which is both good and bad. Fantastic for property prices, all of these things. Not so great in terms of what this, of course, means for locals. And we talk about, of course, two countries which have rather low wages on the European scale. So, how does this, of course, how do the forces of both the private sector and the public sector, of course, pull everybody along? And we know the challenges that we've seen, of course, in many cities, not just across Europe, but around the world.
And indeed, for cities like Lisbon and Athens, which have incredibly strong senses of neighbourhoods slap bang in the centre, this is something that, or we've seen it in lots of places where that big boom suddenly carves out the great thing that makes it so precious.
For sure. And I think this is, something you see, right now in Lisbon, many districts of the city, of course, almost becoming, I don't know if you've been here lately, Emma, but you're sort of wondering, am I like, in the 6th arrondissement in Paris, where, stretches of Lisbon, you barely hear any Portuguese. Official language seems to be French. Now, I'm not saying that sort of, the French are necessarily sort of overrunning and sort of ruining neighborhoods, but of course, something starts to happen with property prices. And then what does that mean in terms of the service infrastructure? And of course, where people, Lisboans, where they're going to live.
Tell us a little bit more. I know you wanted to mention the idea of when you have something really wonderful, and I'm not talking about 36 bedside tables, which is frankly mind-boggling, but when you have a really beautiful product and you want to share it with the rest of the world. I mean, obviously, Lisbon and Athens need to sort of keep themselves a little bit secret, perhaps. But the idea that actually what is now really important, and I know you've written about this today in your column, is actually how you transmit that message to the world, because you can get it really, really wrong, but you can also get it very right.
Yeah, well, I think that it's something which it appears in our May edition. I touched on sort of the power of personality, but we've come off the back of a week of the furniture fair in Milan, and of course, all of our focus is on the makers, the designers, the architects, the creators, the ateliers that make all of these things happen. That's where the celebration tends to be. But you can Emma can make the most, beautiful bedside tables in the world that you hope to sell to Six Senses and Aman and various hotel groups. But I think the one area that we don't celebrate, we don't spend much time on, someone has to sell these things. And the power behind these brands is that, yes, you can have a great PR team, but at the end of the day, someone has to sit down with someone often, in procurement, and they have to, of course, romance, why this is built to last, why this is an investment for the long haul, why maybe when it comes time to sell those bedside tables, they're actually going to be worth more than what you paid for when you procured them. And to me, this is sort of an area that is completely left out, because oddly, when you're at a furniture fair like Salone in Milan, so many of the people are actually, who are there, who are actually sort of keeping the economy ticking over, are the forces, all of these people who are the representatives, the sales offices, that of course have to, make sure that these sofas and these kitchen tables and these office systems all sell. And I just think that there is, we talk about sort of the artistry that goes into, of course, being a wonderful architect, but there's a real sense of artistry knowing how to sell, and it is something which I would say quite frequently we just sort of forget about. And oftentimes, doing a deal is seen as grubby, but doing deals is what makes the world go round.
And the idea as well that when you start to take let's carry on with the idea of the bedside table. Once I've made that bedside table and I hand its story over to the people who are going to sell it for me, there is often that problem, isn't there, that the people who are selling the bedside table understand the what, but they fail to grasp the why. Yeah,
and this is, of course, comes down to strong product knowledge, and I think that the people who understand the whats and the whys, these are the geniuses on the sales floor at the end of an email chain, and certainly those who then have to make sure that people can fork out for 36 pairs as well. And that's a little bit what we're at least in part in my column in the May issue, celebrating, just reminding that there are many more people involved. And let's not forget the people, of course, who are making these things, the real craftspeople who ensure that, of course, you have a sturdy and durable product and a beautiful product as well. But also there is that person who's going to maybe, persuade you that the value of actually buying something which is made in Portugal, or the value of something which is made in Greece, rather than something which might be designed in Greece, but is then offshored to the place which can produce it at the lowest possible price.
If I were Jose, I'm dearly hoping, it's not that we don't want to get rid of listeners, but I'm dearly hoping that Jose is not listening to this as he's sort of stacking up his palm trees. He must be absolutely terrified about your arrival later. What else is on the cards, Tyler, apart from scaring plant men?
Scaring plant men. No, apart from that, it is, of course, I'm referring, to our May issue. Now, our May issue of the magazine, I think most of our subscribers will have copies by now. And as we were sort of touching on with Andrew last week, Emma, this is an issue that we brought forward. So I think a lot of people, this weekend are going to be thinking, oh my goodness, I only just received my April issue. Now I've got my May issue already. I know it's partly because we wanted to make sure that we were on newsstand for Salone. So I would say the back part of the day is going to be focused on making sure that we've got a very solid looking June issue. And then it's crazy that we're already talking about the July-August issue. But if we're already having to sort of project ourselves towards the end of May already, when that ships out to press, getting another Monocle companion is coming out, which will be in tandem with the Biennale in Venice. And then already, it's amazing to talk about Mediterraneo, but there's a newspaper that has to happen. So this is going to be a bit of a week of planning, a lot of calls with editors and bureaus and making sure that, of course, all those are underway. And we've been talking about this website for a while now, for the final, I hope, final touches of Monocle.com are about to happen. But this is the crazy thing, we love the world of digital in many ways, but it's incredible that there's just nothing defined. It's so baggy. Whereas, we just cannot miss a print deadline when you have hundreds of tons of paper, sitting outside, the printing plant in Germany. It just happens. It goes. And somehow, because the world of digital is just rather sort of different, these things can just sort of get kicked along. And sadly, that is what is happening. Anyway, hopefully, listeners, there'll be a perky new website 2 weeks from tomorrow.
One day. It'll be wonderful. 2 weeks in the counting. We've heard it there. And perky parrots as well. Tyler, in Portugal, thank you so much for joining us from your balcony. The importance of selling things well. I don't know. I think we're so sales-based in our world nowadays that you are literally sold stuff the whole time. Sold experiences and lifestyles and ambitions and new faces and new everything. And just the idea that sometimes people just forget the fact that they're not necessarily just aftercare, but you're actually selling a thing that we need to use and then ring up about if there's a problem. And it's really tricky now, isn't it, Alex? I'm looking at you. I don't know why I'm looking at you, Alex, but I am.
Yeah, no, but the thing is we do all sell stuff, and even those of us who are freelancers sell our services as well. And I do think, there is something really crucial about it. And I think Tyler's right that there is sort of a perception sometimes that selling things is grubby. I think particularly in the UK, we're very funny about this, that there seems something quite vulgar about putting things out there that people might want. But actually, I think it's more and more important in a world where, the whole internet's silted up with complete nonsense now, sort of generated by AI and so forth, to find something that is the thing you actually want, that's going to do the thing you need it to do, is actually a real achievement. And I do think we're kind of entering a new age of curation, where actually it's more and more important to have somebody you trust telling you, these are the things you might actually like that might do the thing you need them to do. And I think that applies absolutely across the board to everything we buy, experiences and stuff.
Yes, and it's an interesting point that actually you have the idea of curation that requires some sort of product knowledge, which actually nowadays we have such an unwillingness by so many people to go into sales, not because they think it's grubby, but probably because people think it's beneath them, or that they don't want to work in a shop. That actually this idea of people just don't know what they have. There's a big department store on Oxford Street, a very famous one, where they tend to have that they sort of tend to boast that they know what they're talking about. And for a long time, you would have that trusted face when you walked in. Actually finding someone on that shop floor now, and indeed finding someone who gets where the curtains are, is often, an almost insurmountable challenge. And shopping becomes not the exciting journey of adventure that it could be for those of us who quite enjoy it.
Yeah, there's a bit of a hollowing out of the experience in recent years. And obviously during the pandemic years, we all got very used to sort of buying online and even sort of, you might know older relatives, older family members that had always been skeptical about online buying. They sort of had to adapt to it. And now, they're Amazon fiends and parcels are turning up left, right and centre, and they're sort of walking away from going to stores. And people, we all have that thing in our head of, are we being sold to? Is this really right? Can we trust the person selling to us? Versus online verified reviews of people who've bought the products are usually pretty good these days. They have good systems in place on sort of good online reputable stores to be able to tell you if this is the actual product that you need or not.
Did you ever buy anything mad in lockdown? I'm looking at you again, Alex.
It's obviously as if I'm the
likely.
I was going to say, Vincent seems.
Vinny, what did you buy in lockdown?
I was sort of like early on, I had just gone freelance, and I was like, I don't know if I'm going to be working much or what I'm going to be doing. I bought an origami book and set because I was like, this will be quite mindful. I'll do this.
Right.
Didn't make a single one.
Okay.
I bought what was dubbed a modern calligraphy set, which I thought was like a modern way of teaching you like calligraphy. I thought that'd be quite nice. No, it was just like how to write live, laugh, love signs and that awful cursive font.
You can write like Meghan Markle.
Exactly.
Oh, brilliant.
And then there was a guitar, like that didn't go too well. Definitely did that.
What did you do with your origami set and your pen and your guitar?
The origami set I kept because I thought that would be good if I ever had to entertain children, like friends' children. The calligraphy set went to a charity shop.
Okay.
The guitar's still knocking around, but
Excellent.
it's a dust collector.
How about you, Alex?
Nothing. That I feel quite inspired now. But also I love that you were going, Vinny, for sort of craft stuff. You know,
Self-improvement.
this is and sort of
Exactly.
interesting stuff. I think that's kind of great.
I mean, I did buy a Nintendo Switch as well, so
Yeah,
that was
Which has been used the most?
the Switch.
I bought an antique Italian farm bench off the internet.
Aw.
I mean, what could possibly go wrong with that one?
sounds rather nice.
Once I realised that it was going to fit the spot in the house, then off it went. And I remember the day of the delivery, I made sure I was out. Because it was an antique Italian farm bench. It's rustic. It's been sitting outside some farmhouse for a really, really long time. It's lovely. Comfort is... But the idea that it's got a lovely bit of history and it's got a bit of story to it. But the glorious thing was I just made sure that I was...
Is that to avoid what? The cleaning and the lifting up the stairs?
The lifting,
things?
the
Like,
removal
one of
of
those
it.
friends pivot situations.
Yes,
Yeah.
one of those friends, pivot, neighbours, delivery people, partner, anybody apart from me to try and... Because people would look at me and say, well, you bought this thing, you get it into the house. And I just happened to be out. Sorry to everybody involved. It's still in the house. Right, let's talk about the news. Buying things is going to be a really big problem very soon for lots of people. It's as simple as that, isn't it, with the Trump-China tariff war that's going on. And there's lots of machinations and moving, and the fact that it looks like Trump has blinked twice this week. He's blinked first by putting a 90-day pause on all the tariffs except for China. And then he's blinked in the last 24 hours by saying, actually, if you are trying to import mobile phones, computers, electronics, then that tariff is going to be paused as well. This is this really, really strange moment where stuff that is actually going to very much deeply affect our buying power, our ability to do things, exist in the way that we're happy to, is being fundamentally compromised, but changing at top speed. Vinny?
Yeah, I mean, markets want certainty about what is going on. And every time before the 90-day pause, there was a little line coming out that, he's reconsidering it, or there's negotiations going on with Vietnam or whatever. The market rose, and then the administration came out to shoot that rumour down, and the market just sank again. And we're seeing, everyone is watching this. It is overused term, but it is just pure reality TV. And in the past 48 hours now, this reprieve, the Wall Street Journal have got a good piece on tariffs. It's good to be Tim Cook. And of course, we saw Tim Cook, the CEO of Apple, the world's most valuable company, although it has shed hundreds of billions of dollars in share price in the past 2 weeks, because it was looking like iPhones were going to be jumping up into the sort of thousands of dollars. He was at the inauguration back in January. There was some sort of disquiet about the fact that he was there. The only sort of, the openly gay CEO of the world's biggest company, with some of the sort of policies that DEI policies that the Trump administration is going after. And we've seen the likes of kind of Mark Zuckerberg and Elon Musk, sort of this sort of idea that there's a bit of pay for play going on with the Trump administration and access. We hadn't really seen Apple flexing this yet, but I think this is the biggest flex of them all. Getting tariffs lifted off computers, off iPhones, off all of this. These were products that probably Americans were going to really notice more than others being slapped with these huge Chinese tariffs. And the companies Apple, Dell, Nvidia, Hewlett-Packard, TSMC, the big chip maker, these are all going to be sighing with relief this weekend because they're going to avoid these tariffs from China. There's a lot of criticism, and Wall Street Journal, let's not forget, is a Murdoch paper. It is hugely critical of the Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick, saying that he just simply doesn't understand that there is not, hundreds of thousands of Americans with the skills or wanting to sit in and screw in tiny parts of iPhones, and actually the big money comes from designing these things, which America does very well. This was going to be a massive shock, and it's another blink.
What I find amazing about this is that there aren't any moments in history that we can really go back and look at, because I'm not quite sure where the self-destruct button has been pushed so firmly. I'm just looking at the Wall Street Journal again. Two headlines within time, within a space of an inch of each other, which mention the word recession. Now, are we looking for a recession here? Young women are starting to recession-proof their lives. It says America's biggest consumer spenders are skipping manicures and Ubers as worries about the economy increase. I mean, it's that moment where you don't spend what you don't think, what you don't need to. But Alex, as a historian, where do leaders shoot themselves in the foot in such a spectacular manner? Can you look backwards for us?
Well, I mean, we are in somewhat new territory here. I mean, actually, what I keep calling up is that what this effectively is mercantilism. I mean, it's a policy from really the kind of 18th century, where the idea was that you always had to operate on the basis that your exports were worth more than your imports, right? So your balance of trade is that way. I mean, Adam Smith shot this down in The Wealth of Nations in 1776. So I'm kind of calling up Adam Smith to try to explain this to people. I mean, that's sort of hilarious. It's sort of 250 years old. And I mean, I can't really find sort of modern examples that shed more light on it than that. And the whole point of The Wealth of Nations is him saying, North America is a success because it has, sort of open policies, and the empire in India is a failure because of the mercantilist government of it. This is a complete disaster. I mean, that's been explained quite a long time ago.
For those of us who haven't read Adam Smith, just if you could sum up in 2 sentences,
sure.
If you wouldn't mind.
Well, I mean, effectively, that's the idea that, he shot this down because he thought, this sort of protectionism and mercantilism was completely the opposite of free trade, and therefore was actually inhibiting trade. And the idea that you always had to have your exports worth more than your imports was self-destructive and didn't really work, because actually there are different things you do. And we've just seen this happen with these. I mean, it's taken weeks for these brain geniuses at the White House to work out that America is quite dependent on imports of smartphones and computers and semiconductors, right? That these are things that America does not manufacture. And as you say, there are not hordes of Americans waiting to screw iPhones together. Americans, when they there's this disparaging kind of noise coming out from the Trump administration and supporters of it about the idea that they're doing email jobs, right? That people are now doing email jobs. They're not doing manufacturing, which is seen as sort of more masculine, all this. Are you going to somehow start retraining people who, currently work in maybe healthcare assessment to screw together an iPhone? Because those people don't want those jobs. People don't want to do things like work at a blast furnace for 12 hours a day because it's horrible and really hard. They don't want to work in coal mines. They don't want to do these jobs. And Americans particularly don't, who've been generally trained for extremely different sorts of jobs. The idea that you can somehow change this. I mean, the kind of globalization of those industries has been of enormous benefit to Americans.
And what's quite incredible is that we've been talking so much about the decline of manufacturing and the movement of AI coming in and replacing so many jobs, and indeed the robot coming in a long, long time ago, and fears that blue-collar workers would lose their jobs because of AI and what have you. And now we are looking at a country which wants to almost sort of dial back the clock by quite some way.
Well, Trump is time-locked. That's the thing you've got to remember. He is time-locked in the 1980s. He's been espousing tariffs since then. And you have to look at how he approaches business and realise that everything he's tried outside of real estate, and it's debatable whether he's been successful at that or not, but everything else he's tried, he's failed at. He's the only casino operator to ever go bust multiple times. Casinos are money-printing factories, and he went bust in Atlantic City. How can you get the economics of running a casino wrong? He just understands property deals. And so the fact that it's been much discussed, he's ignoring services, which in some countries like Britain, that's a great thing.
Brilliant.
Otherwise, the tariff that we would have got would have been, much higher. He can just only see tangible things, and it's always about the quid pro quo or the sort of simple deal and seeing very clearly that you have maybe done better than this. He doesn't get the kind of interconnected, complex nature of a modern economy. And the other thing which is really interesting is, okay, if you want to put hundreds of thousands, millions of Americans into, these kind of manufacturing jobs again, you will probably, unless you and you can restrict them, and they are slightly restricted in the US, but they're still alive and well. You'll have a massive growth of trade unionism in a way that with younger generations who can organize quickly, who are very online, they will unionize in a way that I don't think we've ever seen before, and really cause problems for these companies in a way that they haven't experienced. Apple doesn't have to deal with trade unions in China on its manufacturing plants.
I would be furious if I were anybody apart from a tech bro in America at the moment trying to run a business, given the fact that clearly someone has got Donald Trump's ear and said, right, basically Apple has got Donald Trump's ear and said, do not do what you're wanting to do. But I know that you wanted to bring in an example of a German company that makes nutcrackers, which ostensibly is quite funny. Well, but actually it's that micro-reflecting macro thing. If you have one decent example that tells the story, this is the wider problem.
Well, there's a wonderful video today on DW about exactly this. So the German nutcracker business, now not a major global industry, not Apple, since you bring it up. But, people will sort of know what these are because one has probably seen the Nutcracker Ballet. And, it's the sort of thing shaped like a soldier or whatever that is a wooden carved nutcracker. And they make loads of these in Germany. What I was fascinated by from the video is that 95% of German nutcrackers are sold in the United States, which is amazing. It's the vast, vast majority of them go to the US to be sold. And I think Americans, sort of emotionally, they love the nutcracker, the ballet. They also, of course, lots of Americans have German or Middle European heritage. And, they see this. But these things are very expensive. I mean, they had one in the video. Now, this isn't the one I would buy, but, each to their own, is a carved model of Donald Trump at his desk, which is a nutcracker. And that retails at $379.
And it's even got the button for the Diet Coke, I noticed, on the desk.
It does.
Yeah.
It does have the Diet Coke Now button, which is very charming.
It has a desk.
Yes, it has a desk.
Yeah, the Resolute desk. It has a,
Yeah. It's quite an involved piece.
Evolved is a very good way of describing something that doesn't really look like a nutcracker anymore. No,
it's more of a sort of objet. And I mean, as I say, it wouldn't really, it's not my personal choice. However, this thing retails for $379. It's really quite expensive. Now, you whack a great big tariff on top of that, it's going to be well over $400. They're very worried about this. So they're very happy about the 90-day pause. But I mean, it turns out there are actually, obviously it's a sort of micro industry, but obviously the people employed in it are highly, highly skilled. Mm-hmm. And they're
all handmade, which I thought was fascinating in the video. You can see them painting each one individually.
I mean, this is why they're expensive. They're handmade by skilled workers in Germany, which is actually quite good on workers' rights.
In a town that only makes toys, it seems, up in the mountains. I mean, it is like a fairy tale.
I mean, it's Father Christmas's hideout, isn't it? It's quite amazing. But, when you sort of start seeing this stuff, you start realising how interconnected all this is. And I mean, the ridiculous sort of Trumpian logic of I've got to somehow get more in than we're giving out. Otherwise, because everything is a zero-sum game, as Vincent said, everything is a deal. And if he's not winning, then he's losing, and therefore it sucks. But I mean, this is rather like going, well, when I go to the supermarket, I spend, 50 quid. They don't spend anything on me. Therefore, I'm going to slap a tariff on them because this is unequal. I mean, that's just not how trade works. Mm.
It is incredible. And just going back to this Wall Street Journal article about how there is and analysts have noticed that actually women are a lot more reticent when it comes to taking risk financially. This is the evidence that's being put forward in the Wall Street Journal. So you are having, as I mentioned a moment ago, these young women who are not having manicures, they're not eating out, they're not taking Ubers, they're not having their hair coloured. It sounds a little bit like pandemic times, but what they are doing is they are just very, very nervous about what is just about to happen. And there is a real sense that America is going into a recession. Or could go.
I think very serious sense. I think it's already, you've got CEOs, I can't remember which major CEO I saw last week say he considered we're already in recession. I think it was Jamie
Dimon of JP Morgan was
He did, but somebody else did as well. Yes. I mean, so, this is being talked about at pretty high levels. And I mean, obviously we won't see it as a recession technically till we see the figures, but the conditions are there for it, absolutely. And if you hit consumer confidence to that level, I mean, of course, people will change their spending.
What's fascinating is, as well, is, in first term, build the wall, Mexico will pay, and he tried to convince people that Mexico would pay. Mexico didn't pay. Americans didn't pay. Americans did pay, but they weren't sort of directly having to give over the money to it. It was taxation. But with tariffs, he's saying China pays. Very quickly, Americans learned, oh no, that is not the case. We are paying, and that is storing up huge problems. There are some arguments that maybe he's trying to bring forward the recession to get it ahead of the midterms because he's wanted to do this project, and it's do it as quickly as he can, maybe get through the recession, use narrative as we're on the up, and then the midterms aren't as bad. But either way, I mean, Americans really are so attuned, more than I think people on this side of the continent, to the flows of the stock market over the past 2 weeks because of their 401ks, because of the way their retirement plans are structured. It's going to be pretty hard for them to recover economic confidence after this, especially if they slip into recession, given Joe Biden left a good economy.
Very briefly, because I know that Guy de Launey is on the line wanting to tell us everything that's happening in Ljubljana. But what I found amazing yesterday is looking at the British news. The British Parliament was recalled at top speed to have an emergency session at a weekend, which is never done, and it was to try to take control. I don't like that expression. To try to
it's a traumatic expression for us.
That's triggered something.
Yes.
To try to take control of Britain's steel industry and a steel plant in the northeast of England, and it was because the Chinese are trying to get rid of it. Chinese owners of a steel plant in the United Kingdom. The Chinese are trying to get rid of it. Now, one wonders whether the last few days and weeks have precipitated the Chinese decision to dump what is effectively an absolutely core part of Britain's productivity.
I mean, and what's really interesting about this is once these blast furnaces cool, that's it, they're done. And so you have to keep the fires burning. And the line from the government over this weekend has been fascinating. As closely as they can say that China and Beijing via this company are just trying to shut these things down to kneecap Britain, that is what they're saying, because they're saying the offers being made to this company are offers that no reasonable company acting in good faith would ever turn down to keep this operating. There are challenges with this. It's the sort of old type of furnace, not the sort of new electronic arc type one. But basically for rail, for major infrastructure, for the tanks and ships that we need to build in this new security world, this thing has to keep going. And what the British government law that's passed is going to do is amazing. Is if this Chinese company tries to sack all the workers today or tells them to stop putting the coal in the blast furnace, the government will overrule them and say, keep working, keep going, and they will be able to just basically seize effective control of this plant.
Let's head now to Ljubljana. Guy de Launey is standing by. Thank you for your patience. Good morning, Guy.
Good morning, Emma, and good morning all. And may I just chip in on what you were just talking about? Would that be okay?
Feel free.
Because we were having a little natter over breakfast about unintended consequences when it comes to the global economy, and how something which is completely or seems completely unconnected can have a major impact on the other side of the world with something which, as I say, appears initially to have no link at all. And we had a little lesson in this in 2021 when there was a fire at a company called Renesas in Japan. And Renesas makes is a semiconductor maker, but it specialises in making microprocessors for cars, not just Japanese cars, but for the auto industry around the world. And this fire at the time caused massive log jams in the auto industry because they didn't have the chips to put in their cars. They had to halt production lines. Because they had to halt production lines for cars, they weren't ordering as much leather from their usual producers to make the leather for the car seats that they needed. Because of that, the farmers who farmed the pigs for this leather weren't breeding as many pigs, which meant there was a shortage of certain kinds of pork product in the United States as a result.
Thank you for that, Guy. The world is connected. What news from where you are?
The world is connected.
Well,
the butterfly's been butterfly's been flapping has been Belgrade this time, Emma.
Thank you for that. What other news from where you are?
Yeah, well, the butterfly in Belgrade has been flapping, and in this case, the butterfly, I mean, can we call President Alexander Vučić a butterfly? I don't think we really can. He's a very large man, more than 6'4" tall, extremely imposing, and he has been trying to impose his authority on Serbia. In essence, we've had months of protests in Serbia, as people may be aware. Anti-corruption protests, I think we can basically call them, led by students. The big one last month got more than 300,000 people out onto the streets of Belgrade. Mr. Vučić clearly needed to do something to show that he's the man in charge, so he decided to organise a rally of his own. That happened in Belgrade last night. And I've got to say that the turnout was large. It was considerably smaller than any of the last month's student protests. So he got 55,000 people onto the streets of Belgrade in front of the National Assembly to give his big sort of speech about how he was in charge and he wasn't going to let anybody else destroy Serbia. The question is whether this now leaves him looking like he is the Mr. Vucic that we've all grown to know over the past dozen years or so, or whether his position is actually weakened by the fact that he got 55,000 people on the streets of Belgrade and the students got 300,000 plus.
Where is this all going, Guy? Because this has been rumbling on for a very, very long time, and it started off with very not humble beginnings, but not an incident that you would imagine could threaten to bring down an entire government.
Well, this started with a tragedy, which was the collapse of a canopy at Novi Sad railway station. Novi Sad is the second city of Serbia. The railway station there had been renovated as part of the big sort of signature infrastructure project of Mr. Vucic and his government. And that was going to be the high-speed railway line between Belgrade and Budapest. So this was, look, we're making a modern country here. You're going to be able to travel from Belgrade to Budapest in less than 3 hours on the train instead of 8 hours in these agricultural rolling stock that we've had since Yugoslav times. This will be modern, symbol of the country, where it's going literally and metaphorically. If then a canopy at a railway station collapses, kills 16 people who were standing underneath, and that's your signature infrastructure project or part of it, what does that say about everything else that you've been doing and how much you care about the people of this country that you say that you love? So that's why it's triggered so much anger and brought so many people onto the streets, not just in November, but for weeks and months afterwards, because they don't feel they've had accountability, they don't feel they've had answers. And we're now at a point where, because it's been led by the students, and the students are trying not to be political, it is difficult to see a way out of this, because the opposition parties haven't really been able to get any leverage on this. Mr. Vucic obviously is very frustrated by the fact that the students are able to get so many people, ordinary people, on the streets on a regular basis. So is he now going to take a more authoritarian turn? That's what it sounded like, to be frank, from his speech last night. He was calling on prosecutors to take action to restore peace and order to Serbia. He was calling out the national broadcaster RTS, saying that they'd been a key participant in trying to foment what he calls a colour revolution. So this is harking back to, for example, the Orange Revolution in Ukraine in the 2000s. That all sounded a bit worrying, to be frank, when until now the authorities have had a fairly light touch towards the student protests.
Let's move on to a story that we've been covering all week, or for some time. I think earlier this week on The Globalist, you and I were talking about the arrival of a large military ship that was suddenly painted with an Albanian flag and given an Albanian number. This keys into this rumbling issue about how Italy is treating its migrants.
Indeed. And they had one more. It had one more go, this ship, the Libra. It had one more go as an Italian vessel before it was handed over to Albania. We all thought it had been already handed over, but then it turned out that was just a ceremony. And on Friday, the Libra brought 40 people from Italy to these asylum outsourcing centres in Albania. There are two of them in Shenzhen and Jadar. And this whole thing, again, it's an illustration of hubris by a leader who wants to be seen as strong and makes a big noise about a signature project, which then goes sideways on them. And the leader in this case is Giorgia Meloni, who made a big noise about these asylum outsourcing centres in Albania, that this was going to be a model for the whole of Europe, that you weren't going to have people making irregular arrivals in the European Union, claiming asylum and being treated with due process in Italy, but you would, in essence, offshore them in Albania. They wouldn't even reach Italy. They'd be intercepted, taken directly to Albania. Their asylum claims would be processed there, expedited, and people would be repatriated if they were found not to have a valid claim for asylum. The Italian courts have been blocking this. So what the Italian government has done is decided, look, if we can't use them as asylum processing centres, we'll use them as detention centres. So we'll bring people over who've already failed in their asylum claims in Italy, and we'll bring them over to Albania before being possibly repatriated at some point. And of course, again, this is raising issues. This wasn't the agreement that Albania and Italy had made. It wasn't about Albania being an offshore detention centre for Italy. It was about processing asylum claims in Albania and in Italian-run centres. So this is Giorgia Meloni trying to show, I think, that maybe the 600 million odd that she's spent on this project isn't going to go to waste. But it looks very much like performative politics.
Finally, we're all thinking about where we're going to go on holiday this year. It is the thing of the major topics of discussion at the moment. And where we go on holiday, depending on noise levels, is not something that necessarily hits the spot, but this is something that's becoming an enormous thing.
On the Croatian island of Hvar, it definitely is, because it depends who you want to believe on this, Emma, but the local council on Hvar is refusing to raise the nationally mandated noise limit for the bars and restaurants and very limited nightlife in Hvar from 65 decibels. 65 decibels is pretty quiet. It's a sort of normal conversational buzz. And all the hospitality operators in Hvar, or a lot of them anyway, their big hospitality association there, saying, how are we meant to entertain our guests? How are we meant to have musical performances and, turn up the music a bit and have a party atmosphere? And the local council has said, frankly, we don't want to be that kind of island. There are plenty of places in Croatia where you can have a party, where there are beach clubs and festivals and the like throughout the summer. But we want Hvar not to be that kind of island. And this is a rather existential battle between the hospitality industries and the council, the authorities of Hvar at the moment. But I don't know about you. I'm feeling like Hvar might be a fantastic place for a holiday now.
Yes, I'm absolutely signing up to this thing. Does it mean that they get disbarred from those people who come and stand by your restaurant table and play the Gypsy Kings 37 times badly?
Exactly that, because that would be above the 65 decibel limit. So, if you want to avoid all of that sort of thing, Hvar sounds like it's very much going to be the place to be. The only thing which could scupper that is the forthcoming local elections in Croatia, which one can only imagine the Hospitality Association of Hvar will be trying to put get their oar in on that and see if they can get some more sympathetic councillors on the city council who will up the decibel limit a bit. But perhaps we could go and campaign for the other side.
Absolutely, I'm with you on that one. Guy de Launey, thank you so much for joining us on the line. Annoying things on holiday, that absolutely gets me. That the people with the Gypsy Kings is a thing for me. Also, the person who tries to sell you the bad roses.
Yes, I wish for neither of these things.
That came from the bargain bin at the end of the supermarket's day, and they're trying to... And it's really... They don't read the room. I was walking down a street in Italy, holding hands with my husband in deep conversation about 2 weeks ago, and a man with roses came in and intercepted us both and said, would you like to buy a rose? And it was like, could you just not see we're busy? We're having a cat chat. How about you? Vinny, what do you... are you a quiet or a noisy holidayer?
I like a chilled holiday.
Yes.
I do like a quiet holiday. I think if you're a journalist, you're probably running around a lot of busy places. There's a lot of stuff going on, a lot of noisy, a lot of people. And I like somewhere really quiet, hence why I'm looking at the moment for a quiet, chilled out island in the Mediterranean to go to this summer to do lots of swimming and maybe some scuba diving and that kind of thing.
The Croatian island of Hvar might be your place. How about you? Are we all going to Hvar?
I think we are. I think it's a Monocle group trip. We're all going. I'll hold up my umbrella and you can all follow me. Yes. I think both types of holiday can be fun. I mean, I don't mind somewhere a bit buzzy because I love a city break and that can be absolutely fine. But I do agree that the Gypsy Kings, I'm afraid, is a bit much. I was in Santiago de Compostela this week and, you're just sort of sitting there outside the cathedral having the most wonderful plate of seafood and then somebody turns up. I mean, and not just a guitar, but amplified. It's sort of the point when your heart just completely sinks and you think, oh God, paradise lost.
It's the moment when you've just sat down.
Exactly.
And then that
and
sound
even worse,
when
yes,
plugged
that
in.
noise, just as the plate of grilled prawns has arrived in front of you, so you can't even get up and leave because it's already there and this is just, you're just in for this now.
I know. And I wonder who actually likes the Gypsy Kings. Apologies to the Gypsy Kings.
No, perfectly fine.
Wonderful
Just context.
musicians. It's when you get your when there's the offshoots of the 3 generations down. I wonder who actually does enjoy them, because you do notice that moment when I think if you're about 6, it's quite fun for about 5 minutes, but everybody else just stares at their food and it becomes really uncomfortable.
I think if you want to make money and you're a busker in Europe this summer, you should get a really good rendition of the White Lotus theme, because everyone loves that song. Try and do the vocal ad-libs if you can. Yeah. I think that would, you would go viral on TikTok if you were doing a good performance of that.
Goodness me. I don't think I want to go viral on TikTok on holiday or at any time.
No, but the musician will be, you can see it.
Also, I definitely don't want to stay at the White Lotus. It seems like a very dangerous place to have a holiday.
You want to come out alive.
Yes.
Yes, it's good. Okay, so here we go. So you're going to be you're singing the White Lotus.
Yeah.
So we're now going to ruin the island of Hvar, and we've started a band. So you're bringing the White Lotus.
Yeah.
How about you?
Well, I like that. I think we should punch it up a bit more relevant. Let's have some Chapel Rowan.
Excellent.
Great sing-alongs. Yeah.
Excellent.
There's some
rumoured to be
wonderful
going
pop.
to Glastonbury.
Rumoured.
I'm very excited about. I'm going for the first time.
I think, that will be very good. There's a renaissance at the moment of pop, actually. I do think at the moment, if you're, a young kid and you're into pop music, for years it's been a bit basic, and suddenly you've got these wonderful new acts, Chapel Rowan, Sabrina Carpenter, Charlie XCX, all these incredible people. I think pop is having a boom.
Lady Gaga back headlining Coachella this weekend.
What's her album like? Good album?
Billie Eilish.
Pretty good. It's pretty good. Yeah.
Lots of really wonderful young female stars kind of doing some really unusual things, really inventive.
And increasingly, though, the death of bands. There are no new bands anymore because Gen Z is very individual.
You can't afford it either. You can't afford to tour, you can't afford to play. And you can't get a record deal. And even when you do get a record deal, you get no money from it. It's tough.
And you can't get a visa to go and play music in Europe. So all of this is a problem.
So don't worry, but we will circumvent all of those with our Hvar party bus band.
So every time it's a Chapel Rowan song, then me doing White Lotus, then another Chapel Rowan song, then me doing White Lotus.
And then we're all hauled off to prison because you're not allowed to go over 65 decibels.
We're fine. Honestly, Hvar, you've got nothing to worry about. You wanted to talk about, let's move back to some of the things that you wanted to talk about. I know, Alex, let's talk about fun and deliciousness. So you were eating your prawns in Santiago de Compostela, which sounds like a very nice thing to do. But there is a problem now with nice food, is it's being stolen.
So I'm fascinated by this story, and there's a good deep dive in The Guardian today into it. Basically, what seems to be happening is that there've been, and people probably remember because it was quite big news, that about, a couple of years ago, there was a big cheese heist. A whole truckload of Neal's Yard cheese, of, really sort of high-end cheese, was basically just stolen. And it was really quite, it wasn't just sort of somebody nicked the truck. It was a really quite involved plan where there was kind of a fake buyer who phoned up and said they wanted all this stuff and that they were going to order it. So, it all turned up. And so, the company sort of went ahead and sold them all this, and a lot. I think it was, several £100,000 worth of cheese. I mean, really a lot. And of course, this is all coming from small suppliers who can't really afford to lose that amount of money. Anyway, it just disappeared and they never paid. The cheese vanished. Hundreds of thousands of pounds worth of it. And there have been actually now a couple of arrests, and it looks like they might be tracking down who did this. But there's been huge concern about this because it seems to be happening more and more. There's a story in the Guardian piece about a man who runs a smoked salmon company who had a huge amount. And again, in a similar way, it's not that someone has actually hijacked the trucks. It's a very sophisticated scam. But one of the big questions
Can I also say that the scammer had the fake alias of Mr. Moulin, which I think is the most obvious scam French name ever.
It's just like, bit.
Oh, guys, what's French? Moulin Rouge? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, well, once you sort of put the pieces together, it does seem a little on the nose. But, of course, they just don't think this, because they think, who the hell's going to steal the smoked salmon?
Well, who the hell is going to steal the smoked salmon? Because the cheese
is the question.
The cheese stays around for a bit.
Yes.
But when you've got a lorry load of smoked salmon, the clock's very much ticking.
Yes, it is. You've got to get it. Well, the kind of working theory, and I mean, I've got a friend who's a cheesemonger, and this is discussed a lot. The working theory is probably that since, of course, sanctions went on Russia, there is still a big market in Russia, a demand for this sort of luxury food, and that probably the trucks are going straight to Russia to bust those sanctions and to make sure that people get nice cheese in Moscow. And the reason for that is partially that things like, so the world of luxury cheese, and, there are cheese markets around, is very intimate. All the cheesemongers know each other. The stalls in those markets, everyone runs them. So you couldn't just turn up and start a stall and hawk this stuff in London because everybody in the industry knows each other. It's just not possible to do that. So it has to be going somewhere outside the normal purview of where it would be sold in kind of Western Europe or somewhere like that. So this is why the theory is that possibly there's a bit of sanctions busting going on, and that possibly cheese tables and cheese plates in Moscow and St. Petersburg are rather less bare than they would be under the sanction regime. And this may well be the case with the smoked salmon as well.
And things are getting more expensive. I think $1 million worth of olive oil was stolen in Montreal in February, which, again, you can hide Montreal's supply of olive oil, but still don't know what happened to that truckload of smoked salmon. Vinny, at the beginning of this programme, you wanted to talk about the internet helping people to not go to work. We've got about 3 minutes. So where do you want to go with this?
Well, this is a really fascinating story in the Sunday Times, and it's about the woman teaching France to live on benefits and even get fired. Now, if you don't know, France has a quite remarkable quirk in its welfare system. If you are fired in France, for 18 months, the state will pay 75% of what your salary was at the point of being fired. And this is about two young French women. Lorraine Levy is one of them. And she's gone viral on TikTok for teaching young French people who are finding that there is a big generational divide in workplaces, that they're not enjoying where they're working in their sort of first job or their second job. And it's teaching them how they can basically get fired so that they can then have this sort of career pause, find something they want to do, and have this pretty substantial salary paid for by the state. And it is really interesting. We're seeing this around the world, very different attitudes to work from the latest generation to sort of leave higher school or university and go into the workforce, just not putting up with the kind of misogyny or sexism or just kind of aggressive behaviour that past generations have thought you've got to sort of grin and bear it and then you'll get there and hopefully things will improve once you're at the top.
And is this mainly women, or is this lessons to be learned for everybody?
I think it does seem as though this is women who are really sort of still finding attitudes from older male French colleagues, according to the piece, problematic and troublesome, and they're not willing to do it. So they're deciding to take advantage of this. It does mean that France spends, it says, around a third of GDP on welfare. It's one of it's the biggest bill in Europe for this, the biggest OECD bill for this. And they're giving tips about how to do this in an effective way and then how to pivot into sort of going and finding places you actually do want to work in.
And what does this do, Alex? Does this pull into a generational thing, or is this just people simply playing the system?
Well, I do think the system rather encourages this, because 18 months of through to sort of 75% of pay is a lot. I mean, and I'm very pro workers' rights, but even I think, goodness me, that's generous.
Well, to compare in the UK equivalent economy, I mean, if you were on a job here that, paid £100,000 or whatever, and you were fired, if you were then decided, if you didn't have any savings, remarkably, but if you did decide to then go to the welfare office, the job centre here, you'd be put on £90 a week.
Yes,
like that is the fall off in a sort of normal economy.
So I mean, it does seem rather extraordinary, and I mean, I do think, of course, there's a generational thing, and the piece is focusing on that, and I think obviously this influencers are focusing on this because that's who they are. They're sort of younger women looking at this market, and I do think Vinny's right in saying that certainly in France, there are perhaps some dinosaurs in office life who are still making unpleasant comments to young women and this. So, at that level, one sort of understands that there's a bit of a motive. But you kind of wonder how long a system... I mean, it's quite extraordinary, as you say. As a share of GDP, France is spending 31.6% on welfare payments compared to an OECD average of 21%. I mean, that is... massive.
Sizable. That's your defence budget. That's more than your defence budget multiple times. Just the difference in that gap. But and some of the techniques. I mean, they're not saying do anything illegal or anything like that. They're just saying be late all the time, be unwilling, be the worst colleague possible. When you're summoned to a meeting to discuss being fired, don't go.
Wise words from Vincent McAviney to conclude today's programme. The warmest of thanks to my guests in the studio, Alex von Tunzelmann and Vincent McAviney, and dialing in Guy de Launey and our editorial director, Tyler Brûlé. The programme was produced by Desiree Bandley and Mariella Bevan. Our studio engineer was Mariella Bevan as well. I'm Emma Nelson. Monocle on Sunday returns next week, but from now until then, enjoy the rest of your weekend.